Hello, everyone. How are you guys doing? Let me introduce myself. I'm Hasno Hadi. I'm from PlayStation Studios, and more importantly, thank you to Gwen for giving me the honor to be able to moderate this esteemed panel of really great people from the great studios in Singapore right now. We have, and they will introduce themselves and where they come from. But I'll introduce you to Darryl Long from Ubisoft. We have Dib from Keyword Studios and Raymond from Koei Tecmo. So, just to give you a bit of an agenda of what we'll be speaking about today, we'll be talking about production pipelines and scaling up. And you'll be hearing from sort of the best AAA studios within the region right now, if not the world. And they'll be introducing themselves. They'll be talking about, how they got into the games industry, what they're doing right now within their own studios, right? And that's first part of the panel. But we'll be also talking about how studios plan for the next big title. There's so many, especially within AAA. It's very complex. Very at the top quality of graphics, video, music, very expensive. And so, how do they make the business rationales in actually making a development in these games? We'll also be talking about what it is to also work in large scale teams. We have a lot of these companies already, studios around the world globally, working almost 24 hours in making these sort of games in different parts of the world. And last but not least, really go into depth about how they work on these projects across the studios, looking at what's happening in Singapore itself and how it's working towards the global sort of content creation. So without further ado, I'd like our esteemed panel to actually introduce themselves. So probably I'll start with Darryl first, and after that we'll go to the others. So Darryl, please take over.
Thanks very much, Hasno. So my name's Darryl. I'm the managing director of Ubisoft Singapore and Philippines. I've been in the video game industry now for about 20 years, 18 years of those at Ubisoft. So it's been quite a career. So my work at Ubisoft was mostly on the Far Cry series. I worked on Far Cry 3 as the first Far Cry game. Before that, I also worked on Rainbow Six. I worked on Shaun White snowboarding, and way back before that, I was also working on the Simpsons games, Simpsons Hit and Run, and some of those games. So since then, I've been in Singapore for about 6 months now, really happy to be here. How far do you want me to go, Hasnell, before we introduce everyone else? You're on mute.
Yeah, we can start with that first, then maybe let Dib and Raymond. So Dib, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, hello everyone, and again, thanks for inviting me to this panel. I've also, like Darryl, I've been in the game industry for close to 20 years, actually 17 to be precise. Started in 2004, and I actually came in from the financial services industry, so I didn't know how much fun it was before I got into games. So so it was a pretty big change when I moved from the financial services industry to the games industry, and I haven't regretted it once ever since. So we started up in 2004, and I was a co-founder of a studio called Largescale, which is currently owned by Keyword Studios, and we produce game art and marketing services. We provide those services for leading publishers and developers around the world. I've been in Singapore for almost 10 years now, and it's been very exciting so far.
Thank you, Dib. And finally, Raymond, the real Singaporean in this conversation.
Raymond, please. Hi everyone. Raymond here. Can you hear me? I presume from Koei Tecmo, Singapore. I joined this company about 17 years ago. So proud to joining this company. I was in non-related industries from IT and engineering. I was myself trained as an engineer, and then subsequently went to business. It was only when the Singapore government decided to promote this industry. That's when the various few companies in Singapore started. I believe Koei Tecmo is probably one of the first, maybe even ahead of Ubisoft, to start up in Singapore. And myself having a badge number of 0001, that probably legitimately makes me the first AAA company employee in Singapore. But when I joined, I really had a passion to want to make games. Unfortunately, they told me and say, Raymond, you know nothing about making games, much as you have the technical experience. So they asked me to take part of the business elements and of running the studio. And since then, I've been doing that. Singapore studio itself, right now, we're about 100 plus strong. We work very closely with the group itself on various flagship titles. We are spread across quite a number of things: PC, mobile, console. We employ a variety of different people here: engineers, designers, programmers, working on tons of things that come and go, things that are like with us for like 8 to 10 years, and ongoing services and such. Yeah, so it's been an exciting time. Yeah, it's like exactly like the rest here. It's once you get in, it's like this is like just on the roller coaster ride perpetually.
Yeah. So keep that in mind, because the next part of it will be talking about how you got into the industry, like, and how we can actually help other people think about how they want to get into the industry. I would, to Darryl, I would say one of the key reasons that I joined the game industry is because of Ubisoft, because of Assassin's Creed. I love the Assassin's Creed. I spent 150 hours on Assassin's Creed Odyssey. That's how much I loved it. 100%, in the maps and everything. But yeah, again, a gamer, and now I'm part of a game development studio. So that's one of the reasons why I joined. I'm not a game developer myself, engineer just like Raymond. But how is it that Dib is a great example. He came from finance and then now in games, and built his own studio and stuff. So why don't you give your perspectives, your experiences of how you got into the game industry in a bit more detail, a bit more depth, so that we can give sort of the listeners an idea of how they could possibly come into the game industry, especially with the AAA game industry. Anyone can start.
Well, I'll start. Sure. So actually, I've been making games since I was a little kid. I always loved games. My dad loved games as well, and so I was playing games. But growing up in Canada as well, we had access to lots of tech and the Atari and all that stuff. And we got a Commodore 64, and I wanted to play games on it, but with the Commodore 64, it didn't come with a lot packaged in, right? So my mom managed to get a couple of video games for it, and I played those, but I said to her, I want to make my own games. And she said, okay, well, sure, I have no idea how to do that, but let's figure it out. And my mom actually taught herself how to code so that she could teach me how to code. And that's how I really got started. And I think that really set the stage for me to go into engineering and coding through all that and everything. But when I graduated from university, that was back in the 90s. And there was like the video game industry in Canada was super young at that point. And so if you go to your high school guidance counselor and say, what are my options when I graduate, they're not going to tell you video games. And it was the same for me. So I went into the finance industry also. Seems there's a theme here. And I worked in finance for a couple of years, and I hated it. Like, I was having no fun at all. It was soulless work. I'm sorry to anyone who's in finance. And it never occurred to me to actually try and do video games. But at some point I just said, okay, I need to stop doing this. And I quit my job, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And it was absolutely a turning point. When I started looking for jobs that I could take, I saw a video game job. And the thing is, I never stopped playing games. I never stopped trying to make my own games. So when I applied for that first video game job, I had a portfolio. I had a portfolio of games that I built, some on my own, some with friends, some were just straight up ripoffs of like Doom and different games like that. But I tried to build my own games. And that's what got me into the industry. That's what got that company to take that first shot with me. And then Hasnell, kind of like you, the reason I went to Ubisoft is because I loved Ubisoft games. Rainbow Six was by far my favorite game. So I moved to Montreal with the plan of working for Ubisoft, and I applied for Ubisoft and they didn't call me back. So I was in Montreal with no job for a while, and finally they did call me. Finally, I got a job at Ubisoft, and I did eventually get to work on Rainbow Six. And yeah, that's it. I think
That's awesome. How did you start in Rainbow Six? What were you doing exactly? Like,
I was lead programmer on Rainbow Six Lockdown, the first one, doing the Xbox version of the game. Yeah.
Nice. I played that too. I played a hell of Rainbow Six too. So yeah, it's cool stuff.
Yeah.
Cool. So you engineer, went to the finance. Well, like Dib will know what that means, and finally you ended up as a programmer, and now you're leading the studio. So awesome. We'll go into that into more detail later when we talk about running a studio. All right. So Dib, you're the part of the floor.
Well, yeah, so my story is not as inspiring as Darryl's, unfortunately, but let me take a go at it anyway. So I started off in the game industry having spotted a business opportunity. I clearly thought that I was like I mentioned earlier, I was in finance and doing reasonably well. But then when I turned entrepreneur and I was looking at industries which are going to be which are going to be big, and what is the big opportunity. And one of my co-founder, he was a programmer, and he was pretty much like Darryl. He used to make his own games and stuff. And then we thought, this industry is going to be, it's a great opportunity to build a business in, right? So I came in more, and though I'm also an engineer, but maybe I have kind of not used that much. But I thought I came in from the pure the opportunity that this is an exciting industry. It's a growing industry, and I thought that there's going to be this industry is kind of like a quote unquote evergreen. I don't think this industry is ever going to stop growing because it's just so exciting, and it's just going to have more and more people. When we started, games was purely, this was 2004, and all the gamers we knew were just hardcore gamers. But as you see now, there are so many casual gamers and everyone else. So the population has, the entire target market for gaming has just exploded ever since. And it makes me believe that we took the right decision. In addition to that, it was obviously a fun process because you work with really talented people. You work with really fun people. So it is a great opportunity, and you have fun. So what else can you ask for, right? So that's how I got into it.
No, for me, I'd like to thank you because you took the risk of setting up a company just to do games, right, in a place that didn't know about it, and you gave not an opportunity to yourself, but you gave opportunity to others who wanted to be, making games too. So that's pretty cool, Dib. So Raymond, tell us about your story.
I'm still taken aback by Darryl's story about his mother teaching him programming. That's really something new I've heard. I think I kind of got interested in games in the early teens, and this was when the PCs started coming in. You have your Mac, your Apple, and your PCs, and when things were still the monitors were just having green displays at that time. So that gives you some sense of how young or old I am, right? I picked up programming on my own, picked up some books, did some stuff, did some games, and I thought this would be something interesting as a hobby. And in subsequent years, I didn't imagine it would become a career. I think because in some sense, when I went into choice of a first degree, when I graduated, the choice of a first job, there was nothing related to games in Singapore. I even started my own company, ran that for a while. Maybe there was this secret dream inside whereby I would be like Dip and maybe making games too. But of course, you have to feed yourself to do stuff. You have to do bread and butter issues. And the opportunity came along when I spotted advertisement, Koei Tecmo, right, coming to Singapore. And I remember, I learned my history from their games, right? Three Kingdoms, the awesome part about Chinese history, and I thought this is something I know. This is something I know. This is something I played. but I don't know what I'm getting myself into. And I joined, they had a program where they send people to, this is thanks to the Singapore government. So they primed the industry here then, and people are sent to Japan for training. I was supposed to be there for about 1.5 years, but they shortchanged me somewhere in the middle, and they say, Raymond, you have to get back now and start the studio. I'm like, what? Just starting to enjoy myself. But when I was in Japan, I think I learned an awful lot, and since then, every time I get back there, it's really at the heart of heart and soul. One of the prime movers of industry over there. And I think after we started, we have been in very close connection with Japan in terms of to move the studio and develop the studio further. I think today, when I look at the people around the younger generation, it is with a huge sense of envy, right? I spent like more than half my life trying to get to where I am. And then today, when they graduate, they have choices, or even before they graduate, they have choices to get into this industry. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah, and going back to what you said about, getting that opportunity to go to Japan for training. Now that training is already available in Singapore, right? All they need to do is to look for it, and it's all available there. And then the jobs are already available. So, this is the prime opportunity for those who really want to be in the industry. They've got everything in place already, and SGGA as a place to get that information from. But yeah. As I'm as old as Raymond, Romance of the Three Kingdoms on PC. That was a really old game. I see someone talking about Dynasty Warriors, but yeah, that's new. But Romance of the Three Kingdoms, yeah, that was almost text-based, right? Okay, so thank you for giving sort of a little story about yourself. We're always going to remember about Darryl's mom, because Darryl's mom was awesome. All right, so we hope our moms will be like that. My mom was like that, but she didn't learn the code. She just allowed me to play my game. So that's my mom. But let's now dive into your studios, right? Let's talk about how your studios have grown from where it was to what it is now. And then I know, Darryl, you're new, but I'm sure you know of the history of how Ubisoft grew, and Dib, from Largescale to becoming Keywords, and Raymond, from the start, zero to hero, right? So in this point, like let's see how and the question, the part of the agenda is like, how do, and I'm sure Dib, you understand, you can talk to this too, right? How studios decide what games to do, what games to make, right? And then from there, how do they grow within the studios, the type of work that you guys are doing. So again, anywhere you guys want to jump in, any part of that production, please just jump in, right?
Sure.
I can choose. Okay, well, let's start with Raymond. Raymond, you ended it. Let's just start with you.
Okay,
and let's go through this.
Okay, I think as part of a bigger group here, we do have a certain luxury of relying on processes that we know have worked and have been refined over the years. And I think over the last maybe 10 years itself, Koei Tecmo used to be just Koei and Tecmo, which were two different companies. But over the years, knowing how to manage the production pipeline, starting right at the very start, even before things start, right, is actually quite crucial and key. Right? Many of the titles that you see today or have been launched, last year, the last 2 years, we had like Hyrule Warriors, Neo. These things don't just come out. They were the thinking processes that happened like 5 years ago, 3 to 5 years ago. So a lot of what you want to look out for, you have to have a pretty long-term vision about things, what you want to make, a good sense of the market, what is really working, what might be tweaked further to work better. At the end of it is a business, right? So at the end of it is about making the dollars and cents count. At the end is about knowing where the demand for the product might be, how many units you might sell, what kind of sales you'll get in, and then you have to have a pretty solid business case. And I think being a large studio in some sense helps, because you do have quite a lot of cumulative experiences in terms of the numbers, what you see, where at which point where you jump into the different milestones, you're ahead or a bit behind, right, on that, and then where you need to catch up on as well. So maybe I'll just start off with that, and then I can probably pass it, and then I don't dominate this part here, right?
And yeah, just to keep in mind, I might jump into it. Like, do you also get involved, since you're in Southeast Asia, right? That information about the market and what they love, would you also bring that to Japan for them to make those kinds of decisions? But again, let's go to the others and see what they have to say about this. Yep.
Yeah, let me go next. So I think, as a service provider, what we realized when we started, again, way back in 2004, what the games are just going to get bigger in terms of production. And, as Raymond just alluded to, the production teams are going to get bigger. They're going to get, games are going to be produced not in one location like they used to. They're going to get produced all over the world, right? It's going to be, from a single studio producing a game to multi-studio, multi-time zones producing a game together, right? Maybe this was something which I think we kind of invested on in very early, and that's why we actually really set up the studio to actually help large publishers scale up their teams, right? So even large publishers and developers, when they needed to scale up the teams, we said, we can do it for you. So I think it's important to kind of look at the game production cycle today, as both Darryl and Raymond would kind of testify. It's much more complex, and it's getting more complex as we go along, right? The faster, I mean, all of us really are trying to kind of simplify a very complex process. I think that's really, I would say, if we can even contribute to a fraction of simplifying the process, I think we've done a great job. And one of the things to, again, to go back to where I started from, when I was saying that, when we started looking at the game production process, we realized that, it's not, you need to have people, you need to have a continuous production cycle. The production cycle never stops, right? And hence we kind of figured out a way to make it easy for publishers and developers to scale up their teams, and then, to make sure that the game is produced on time, on budget, which is very important. As Raymond said, at the end of the day, it's a fun industry, but, people, the industry has to make money. And the only way you make money is having strong business economics behind it, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's what
I'm just curious. Have you had partners that actually reached out to you in their process of trying to figure out if they're going to go forward with building that game? That, hey, what do you guys think about, if we're going to do this sort of size of game, do you think that, you guys can participate in to make that kind of decision? Have you seen that before? Just again, curious.
Yeah, I think a lot of our partners and our customers, they come to us. Obviously, initially, I mean, it depends on which part of the game development cycle we come in on. But a lot of them come with us with start with us with an idea. And they say that this is what we are building, because they want to build the partnership very early on, right? Because that's how you build a long-term partnership because as at the end of the day, we are a services company and we can help them build the game, right? So they come to us much earlier in the cycle. Not all of them do, but a lot of them come much earlier in the cycle. But at the end of the day, we are very partner with companies at any stage of the development process, right? But you're right. I mean, at some stage they come in early. Some they come in when the production is in full swing. So that's how we participate. Yeah.
I guess it all depends on the relationships you
Correct.
have with these customers. And so, Darryl, to you, how does Ubisoft do it?
So it's Ubisoft actually. That is one of the things that we do very well, is getting lots of our studios to work together on one game. But I remember in 2010 when that switch was really starting to happen, I was on the Far Cry 3 team, and we didn't want to collaborate with other studios. We all had that mindset of, we're just going to do it ourselves.
Other studios meaning just within Ubisoft, or
even within Ubisoft, yeah. Okay. Even within Ubisoft. But we very quickly realized that's not going to work. The scale of the whole idea of AAA games is just massive, complex games. And we very quickly realized that we were going to be in trouble if we didn't start to work with partners, honestly, both internally and externally. And Assassin's Creed was already forging the path of like creating the model that we needed to follow. So that's what we did, is we talked to the Assassin's Creed team and say, how are you doing it? And the Ubisoft Singapore studio came directly out of that. So the studio's 13 years old now. It started with the intention of supporting Assassin's Creed, and they have been ever since Assassin's Creed 2. So now, over the last intervening 13 years, Ubisoft Singapore shipped, I think it's 9 Assassin's Creed titles. And so we've built up that that idea of knowing how to work with people to build a mandate, how to work with the lead studios in order to frame what it's going to look like, how the mandate can be self-contained or not, or how we'll all work together. And I can go more into that later. But I mean, for Ubisoft, Ubisoft is a very bottom-up company. I think that's the other thing, is these decisions don't get taken by HQ. Ubisoft is a collection of semi-autonomous studios. So those decisions come from the individual studios. Now they're looking for partners, other Ubisoft partners, and also external partners. So, I mean, well, so when I came to Ubisoft Singapore, it's not even 6 months, right? So I'm still the new guy here. But my mandate starting out was to turn the studio culture around. That's what I was asked to do by Ubisoft. Obviously, the studio's been through a lot, right? We all know what's happened. So my goal going in there was to do 2 things: bring a new style of transparent leadership, get things back on track, ensure a safe workplace, make sure that people have everything they need to do the best work of their careers. And then second is to continue the work that's already going on with Assassin's Creed and Skull and Bones. And that's really 2 sides of the coin. Assassin's Creed is a collaboration team that's supporting the lead studios, and Skull and Bones is a lead team that has 8 different studios working as partners all across the world. So it's balancing those 2 things at the same time means we need to really understand how to build and collaborate with other studios from both sides of the relationship at the same time.
Right. And I guess this is such a perfect time to just segue into the next part of it, which is really talking about large scale teams. And maybe from I'm gonna go to Dib first, because he's worked with many teams, right? Not just with you both Darryl and Raymond. You're probably teams within Ubisoft and with Koei, but Dib has probably worked with many teams around the world. So from your perspective, is there differences, or what are things that you are looking at whenever you talk about team communication, production pipelines, the tech that you're using? This might be interesting to the people who are listening.
Yeah, so I think I'll leave I'll cover the tech aspect probably later, or I'll leave it to Darryl and Raymond to cover it. I'll probably just cover the human aspect of it. I think it's with multicultural teams, it's important to to actually have a very what should I say, a very well-defined production pipeline, right? Because it's important if you have people working if you have studios in China, in India, in Singapore, in the US, in Canada, everywhere else. So it's important for everybody to be on the same page and everybody to work towards a common objective, to a common goal. So I think there. And it's also important to work in a true partnership model wherein the handoff and hand-in points are clearly defined, and everybody works towards a constructive feedback process. I think I would say, again, in my experience, I think the critical part of the whole process is, and especially with that we are in a creative industry, is how do you manage the iterative feedback process, right? I think that's in my mind a critical part of the whole process, right? So because the game, since you're actually, developing the game, not in a kind of a big bang approach, but you're kind of developing it in, as you go along. So how do you manage the fact that you have to continuously give feedback at, as quickly as possible, so that you can change direction or at least steer the ship in the, or in a different direction if you need to, very, very quickly, right? So in that respect, I think it's, it's important for, to be in the communication is extremely important, wherein you communicate at regular intervals, communicate transparently, communicate feedback in a structured fashion, make sure that the communication is understood. If you're working with different people from different cultures, make sure the communication in different languages. So make sure, feedback is understood, feedback is conveyed properly. And then, obviously use tools to make sure everything is streamlined and captured efficiently in the production process. So I think, it's a long and short of the, I can't put a kind of finger to one aspect of it, but I would say it's important to manage the iterative feedback process. I think that's the key point in actually making this process more and more effective.
Right. Now, again, more of a curious question. When you talk about iterative feedback process, how many times does it happen? At what levels? I don't know if you want to talk to that about that. Like, is it at the studio head level? Is it producer level? At the artist level? What is the frequency of that iterative feedback process? If you want to go through it.
Yeah. So I think I would say there is a thin line between too much and too little. Okay. Too much where you micromanage, and too little where you go so far down the line that you cannot make a change. Right. So it's a fairly delicate balance, but I think it's important to put those milestones in place, where if there are two teams working together or teams working across the world, you put very clear checkpoints where you evaluate and then move forward. I mean, you don't want to do it so often that it kind of impedes productivity, but you don't want to leave it to so far down the line that it's difficult to kind of change course if you need to.
Yeah. So the other thing is I wanted to find out is on that, like, does it differ from different clients that you work with, or do you have a standard, like, oh, this is the keyword standard, like you go to every client and this is how we do it, or it's all different between the different teams?
No, it's I think it's different from, it purely depends on how the client wants it. And obviously different clients have different methodologies, different ways of working, and different milestones, different checkpoints. So we actually adapt our processes to work with the clients the way they want to work. I mean, obviously we give our inputs, and most clients value that. And but I think it's most, I think the ultimate decision is essentially based on what the client wants and how their production processes taken this feedback, right, or taken these approved process.
Thanks, Dib. All right, Darryl, Raymond, you can jump in.
So what Dib was saying about tailoring the processes and everything is that is really the art, I think, of remote team collaboration. For Ubisoft, because all the collaboration we're doing is internal, we view that all those co-development and collaboration as an investment. So we're investing in the studio that we're working with, and we need it to be a long-term investment. If we spend all that time upskilling them, bring them up to date on the tools, teaching them all the specific tech that we're using, we want to make sure that they're still going to be there on the next game and the next game and the next game. And that's that is part of the model, but it's also a business necessity. So at Ubisoft, there's kind of 4 different levels of collaboration, I would say. And everything, I mean, it's not officialized that way, but that's the way that it works out. It all comes down to what we call crafting the mandate, building a mandate that will work for both parties. And it's an agreement. It's not a contract, but it's almost like a contract where it's like, okay, you're going to deliver this and we're going to take this and we're going to agree on what it needs to look like, more or less. But this is games, right? It's still a creative industry. So it's not like we know in advance that the game's going to be exactly like this, this, and this at the end. So part of the mandate, part of the contract with our partners is we're going to make it up as we go a little bit, and that's normal. So that progression of our collab partners is at the first, let's call it level one. At level one, it's almost insourcing. Like you're telling them, make exactly this. We need you to make these characters, these models, these animations, make exactly that. At level two, you could call it semi-autonomous mandate, where it's like, okay, we're going to let you do like a horizontal part of the game, like one game system or something. Build us that game system. We'll apply it in the game. So you semi-own it. Level three, I think, is where most Ubisoft studios are now, where most of us are working together, especially on Assassin's Creed and Skull and Bones and AAA games like that. The autonomous mandates are, we're going to give you a vertical part of the game. And the easiest example I can give of that is Far Cry 5, where the world was divided into 3 sections, and the Toronto studio owned one section of the world. They owned the north section. All the characters in it, all the missions that were there, the open world exploration, everything, they own that completely. And then beyond that, and this is more rare, but it is, as we're evolving continuously, level 4 would be like a blended team, where the boundary between who's in which studio matters less, and it's more about time zone than it is about anything else. And that's where you have full trust and the teams are working directly together, and you can have that direct contact between anybody at any level in the team. So the types of feedback, things like that, it does change as you move up through the levels of collaboration. And when it's insourcing, you need to be super careful, and you need to make sure that you're not sending people in the wrong direction or giving them too much feedback, as Dib said, so that they feel stifled. But when you're a blended team, you have like texture artists talking to each other, you have producers talking to each other, you have producers from one studio talking to the texture artist in another studio, and you can't get in the way of that, because that is what allows us to have teams like at Ubisoft that are in the hundreds, 600-700 people all working together on a game. So that's how it's scaling right now.
Yeah. Would you say that, COVID is a bad thing, but Ubisoft has it accelerated it in terms of you guys working in a blended team, or you've done that already, and that's what you're proud of as Ubisoft?
It's a bit of both, really. Like I think we were able to adapt to working from home easier, because in a lot of ways we were used to doing it already. Even before COVID, on a daily basis, when I was in Winnipeg, I had calls with people in Toronto. When I was in Montreal, I had calls every day with people in Paris or Shanghai. So we were used to it to some degree, and that made it easier to work from home. But now that we're working from home, and I'm sure you've heard this before, but it puts everybody on the same level. There's no more the people in the studio and the people out of the studio. There's no more us versus them or anything like that. It's all, we are one big family working together on this game. So in some ways, I hope that we keep those good habits as we're coming out of COVID.
Cool. Thanks, Darryl. So Raymond, how's it on your side of the pond?
I think on our side it's probably a little bit different. This is a Japanese companies, and we tend to be a little bit more organized on things and a little bit more time spent on the planning stage. Maybe in regards to the issues about large teams and communications and teamwork, if I were to break it down into 2 parts, the what to do and the how to do, right? For the what to do portion, any project that starts off typically goes through a few stages. In the initial stages is probably at the very senior level, the decision whether or not to go into certain projects, and make decisions based on that. And then the budget is kind of released, initially for the prototyping to go ahead. This will likely come from, at the very executive level, from the president with we organize our companies into brands. So together with the brands in concert, but generally maybe one of the brands decides to push a particular project. Then at that level, they'll see and say, okay, this looks good for the company. This looks like something that we can go ahead with. And then we proceed to the next stage, which is then when the team and the ownership of things starts to get assigned. Your leads get pick up, the director, the producer, and they will be the ones coming up with the initial concept papers and how the game might be like, but still not to the stage where you're going to go into production yet. And that is reviewed one more time. And at each stage, as we move progressively down, everyone has a very clear idea of what this game is heading towards. And if there were any objections or things that they don't feel is right, it's actually highlighted at that level. As it goes down towards the different stages, down to from pre-production to production, we have different stages that kick in where people see different stages of the product, and actually more and more people in organization get involved, right? And the different elements, the different departments looking at it from different perspectives, be it from quality in terms of sound or whether users and sales and stuff, everyone will have a piece to say regarding it. But it will only probably result in minor alterations to the plan. By and large, I think once it's gotten to the stage, production is really on the way and really is playing with the final prototypes, the final products before they release and testing it to see whether this is good enough or whether further iterations are needed. Yeah, so I think maybe our company, because it's smaller in scale, a little bit more focused. We have brands who really look after certain franchises. It becomes a very focused effort to know what's happening. And I think gradually as more and more of the teams get larger, that vision is always communicated downwards. So that's the what part. The how part is when I think we then go down to the level of detail, which is then down to the documents level, where individuals would discuss or leaders would discuss, or from the director, producers downwards, right? And these are articulated at different levels. And I think that part is actually where the communication in terms of seeing eye to eye. So we have established standards on quality, we have established standards on where we should see things being made, whether they will meet a certain cost criteria, on schedule as well, right? So it's very strange because when I joined this company, I was very surprised to see something like art defined as a science, where you can tell every character that's going to be made, how long it takes, how long it makes all the different iterations, and they have this listed down from man hours to man days to man months, right? So it's down to that level of detail, and you will then know and be able to control on the daily to weekly basis where you are on those projects. A huge part of the communication therefore takes place within the organization when you know which group does well in what. Like Singapore does well in certain things, we have a studio in China that does well in certain things, Vietnam does well in certain things, or maybe the parent company, or we realize there's nobody that does well within a group on those elements, and then we work with companies like Keywords, with Deep, we try to figure out certain things together and stuff. So the how part then becomes defined in each of these different compartments, and as they are slowly put together, ensuring that quality, costs, and schedules are always kept, I think kind of keeps us on that track itself. I think one of the key things here is not only with our own IP and our own titles. I think we have gotten so confident of that process itself. In the last maybe 5 years, we have seen a tremendous amount of collaborations we have done with third parties. Hyrule Warriors, Persona 5, Fire Emblem. All these are other people's IP. It's very difficult to touch someone's IP and you get their confidence to say yes to certain things and stuff, right? So, but the only way to do this is when you can assure them of the quality, how you're going to make it, what's going to come out, and then the other party is convinced that you can make it, and then that's where the confidence grows, and slowly you will build up your own portfolio from there. Yeah, I think in our studio, maybe because and we are all in the same time zone as well. All the studios are in the same time, so I think that helps in terms of a lot of the major decision making. Production, yes, we do farm out to different parts of it, but those can happen autonomously as they come as well.
That's interesting. So the question I didn't ask before this, where we started, was how many studios are there within your groups, right? And then from there we can segue into the question about how do you actually do the actual communication. What are the tech that you're using? It might be very interesting to the listeners to know what they can get themselves ready for if they want to join a studio like yours. So maybe we can start with Raymond again. How many studios you have and the tech that you're using, or the processes that you're using?
We define ourselves internally within the group according to brands. So in total, we have a total of 6 different brands, from brands that take care of the tactical action, like your Dynasty Warriors and stuff, to Team Ninja, which is like trying all kinds of different things out there. to Gast, which is famous for the Artelia series. So there are, in general, 6 brand houses out there. Supporting them, we have internally within the studios all the different, we have our own QA company as well that does their own internal checking and stuff. And then we have the overseas subsidiaries. So studios like Singapore, we have a studio in Vietnam, we have studios in China too, right? Which help in various parts of the production or even in leading some of the titles themselves as well. Yeah, I think organic, and then with the external parties, it depends on the projects. A huge number of projects because they involve global, especially with global audiences. We may need global testing abilities. We may need to work with translation companies, for example. Those tend to be a little bit more outsourced, or sometimes even art itself, right? When you've totally run out of ideas within your own groups on where to get, fresher ideas and pieces and stuff, and that's why you should look outwards as
well. Cool. Dib, your experience with the different clients that you have, how do you work the tech part and the communications?
Yeah, I think in terms of since we are a services company, we mostly rely on clients' kind of production pipeline and how we can integrate to that. Mostly, it's them determining how they want to communicate with us, through what platforms, through what systems, and we just kind of adhere to that. So it's given the fact that we are a services company, predominantly working for clients for services. So we have so in terms of studios, I mean, we have studios, and we have over 70 studios, because Keywords is a company which has grown by acquisitions, as you all probably know. So we have 70 studios in over 40 different cities in 22 countries. So and all of these studios help our clients in a particular service or in a particular technical, either it's engineering or art or localization, or audio and so on, or player support, or which are all our service lines. But like in terms of communication, I think, and I'm just talking from the art and marketing service line to which I belong. I think we mainly rely on the customer's preferred mode of communication. I think we are fairly, I would say, agnostic to that. So we really, kind of defer to the client in terms of what kind of communication tools or communication technology they want to use when they're dealing with us, and when they integrate us within their production pipeline.
I mean, just as an average, what kind of software do you guys use? Like, where do you, which ones do you most use with the clients?
You mean in terms of the art software, or?
Yeah, the art software. And well, I guess between the project management software, task managers.
We are pretty much using all kinds of software. In terms of art, we use the standard, I think everything is 3D Studio Max, Maya, ZBrush, and so on and so forth. In terms of engines, again, we make sure that all our art is integrated with whichever engine the client is using.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, it's pretty much across the board.
All right. Okay, how Ubisoft, Darryl?
Well, so all our games are made with internal technology. I shouldn't say all, but let's say most. Certainly, most of the AAAs are either made with the Anvil engine or the Snowdrop engine. So that is always a challenge for people coming in. Is this new tech that's different from Unreal, and it's different from Unity and everything. But of course, we've built programs now to help people onboard as quickly as possible. But in terms of project management, things like that, we use Trello, we use Miro, we use a lot of Microsoft Teams. Like, again, like if anything good has come from the past year, it's that Teams has got a heck of a lot better over the year.
I agree.
Yeah.
100%.
We use Jira as well, quite a bit, Confluence, and that whole suite as well. So, I mean, these are all pretty standard software that we use. In terms of asset creation and stuff like that, it's pretty mixed as well. Max and Maya. We're, again, Ubisoft, because it is semi-autonomous studios all working together, and we are very bottom up. Teams have the flexibility to decide, you know what, for this game, we're going to try using this tool. We want to see if this will work for us. And Miro came around like that too. People started using it because they wanted a whiteboard that they could share. And then Ubisoft said, okay, we better do something. Everyone's using it already. Let's embrace it. And so it became widely usable across the company. And that's the way we do it.
Alrighty, I think we are almost coming to the end of the session. We have about 10 minutes left. But before we go into the question and answer, is there anything that you guys, like I know you mentioned about, anybody coming in, having portfolios. I usually, we ourselves usually get resumes without portfolios coming in, but what kind of advice that would you have for people who want to get into the AAA game industry or into your studio before we end and go into Q&A? I'll give you guys about 5 minutes to do so.
I'll go first. So I think, it's important that there is a level of specialization. Again, I'm not a artist, or I haven't been a programmer, but I think what people, I think it's important if somebody's getting into the industry is to focus on one particular skill, right? And kind of excel in that. I see that people try to do a lot, try and kind of diversify their skill set. I'm not sure if that may also work, but I think that, if you're really good in one area, let's say you're a character artist and you just focus on that, or you're a vehicle artist and you just focus on that, that really gives you a really good springboard. I mean, you might sometimes think that your options become limited, but I think that's not the case. And I would just kind of leave that one kind of point out there, is to just specialize in one area which you're interested in, which you're good at, and build your skills in that.
Thanks, Deb. Raymond?
It's interesting. We were just celebrating the 10-year anniversary and 15th anniversary of employees who have joined the company. And when I look back at some of those people who have joined, they really came from diverse backgrounds. I think at that time too, there weren't any specializations coming out from the schools. But when I look at the end result later, actually probably didn't matter. Yeah, I think the more important thing is when they enter the company, do they have the passion to learn? Do they have the passion to upgrade themselves? Do they have that base capability to learn stuff and pick things out? Because I can say definitely in the last 15 years, we have moved from like PC to console to mobile. And if you hire someone today, whatever they've learned in school is just going to become redundant in the next 3 years' time. So I think hiring that attitude and maybe that potential is quite important for us. We do have tests and stuff, but we don't really say, hey, you are good in this, so therefore we get you. Of course, there are specializations, but they tend to be more of the rarer case. I think in a Japanese company, maybe we look more across at the base general capabilities of people across, because we want them to grow, and maybe their interests may change along the way. They may want to go into business, they want to go into biz dev, whatever it is, right? And hopefully from there, they have all the different career options as they need.
Thanks, Raymond. And finally, Darryl.
100% what Raymond just said. I totally agree. I realized that quite a few years ago, that there's no way anyone can really be prepared to go into the industry. And there's no way you're just going to walk through the door on your first day and be like, boom, here's a AAA character or something. You're going to have to learn on the job. So I completely agree. Hiring for potential, hiring for that passion. It is a very specialized industry, as Dip said. It is really, it's challenging work. If you're not passionate about it, then it's just going to be that much harder. So finding people that can grow as the industry shifts and changes. 10, 15 years ago, none of us were talking about mobile, right? Like, that's how quickly things can shift. So all of our skills, like you can never stop learning. You can never stop growing in this industry.
Yeah, very cool. All right, guys, we've come to the end. There is one question. I hope we can finish that question now, and it's to Darryl. How does a big company go about enforcing the rule of using a standard proprietary game engine? What are the pros and cons of such a move?
So until recently, Ubisoft had a guideline to use the internal engines, but it wasn't actually forced. In general, though, it kind of was self-enforcing. If you need artists that know how to ship a game, they know how to ship the game on Anvil. They know how to produce their assets on Anvil. They know how to, the programmers know how to work in Anvil and how to code for Anvil. So if you suddenly say, okay, we're going completely different, we're going to change to a completely different engine, suddenly where do you find the people inside Ubisoft that are already trained on that engine and using it to create a game? So a few teams have tried to go completely different with the game engines, but every time they hit that wall of, I can't get the people I need, it's too hard to hire quickly enough to do a huge game. So again, it's somewhat self-enforcing.
All right, everyone. I think we can take one more question. So from an art perspective, anybody can jump in, right? From an art perspective, how much resources do you need to dedicate to tackle the challenges involved in keeping external third-party vendors on spec with the creative direction and iconic looks of the IPs you manage? For example, there are many games where characters in CGI cinematic cutscenes made by external vendors do not look like the in-game 3D models or concept art that players would normally see. Wow, this is a kind of hard question. So, so again, from an art perspective, how much resources do you need to dedicate to tackle the challenges involved in keeping external third-party vendors on spec with the creative direction of the IPs you manage? So there could be, somebody working on Mario, then it doesn't look like the Mario in the games that come out when you play the game. So do you think that, how much, I don't know, Darryl, Raymond, who can answer this question?
Yeah, we typically have a team dedicated to that. Like each project will have dedicated people working on just that.
All right. Well, you know what? I think we're done. Raymond, you want to say something before
just to add on, I think pre-qualification of the vendors is extremely important. You want to make sure you pick the right ones who can do your work, and then you will not have as many headaches in trying to fix things for them.
Yeah. And to answer for Deb, go look for keywords. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course, guys. So I think we're going to end this right now. I really thank all of you, Deb, Raymond, Darryl. It's been a really good time. I've learned, again, I'm also a new guy on the block, so I'm learning a lot from you guys too. So thank you very much for your time. I hope to see you guys in real life when we're done with this. All right?
Absolutely.
So bye-bye, everyone.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.